and Soviet Union collapsed, that was a question for me specifically, and others to make a final decision with their own identity. And I struggled because I didn't want to be Muslim or Christian. So I decided to be atheist, and God found me in that time, not through the formal identity, but through real life. And there was a phrase, isn't it hard for you to go against me? And it was exactly a question to me, because I was like, that's my problem, because I'm not just against Christians, I'm actually against the Christ.
Ruslan Zagidulin serves within the Lausanne Movement, helping to connect leaders across Central Asia and other parts of the former Soviet world. I'm grateful to Ruslan for opening his heart about grief, hope, and what it means to trust in God's faithfulness, not only for this life, but also for the life to come.
It's really good to be with you today.
Thank you, Gordon. It's a huge pleasure to be with you, to spend time together.
It's a while since we've had a proper conversation with each other, a long time.
Yeah, exactly. We met a couple of times, but we didn't have a time just to really have a time to talk and share some ideas and thoughts. It's good to have you.
We've known each other for, I think we worked out earlier, probably about 10 years.
Yeah, something like that. It's just because of the Converge and the work with youth and teenagers. That was an amazing time to meet each other and to talk about and to see what God is doing in the different places, and specifically in Asia, right? And yeah, I'm so grateful to God that it's one of the huge blessings in my life to spend time to you and other leaders, Christian leaders, and to see God, what God is doing in the different places and the projects you as well involved with them.
So Converge was this network of youth leaders around the world. It's now rolled into a wider movement called Next Move, and you're still involved with Next Move, or becoming more involved with Next Move, but we've lost contact with one another a bit since Converge rolled into Next Move.
I would say there is some DNA of Converge still be in Next Move. I'm not sure that everybody within the Next Move family grasps the whole package of the specifics of the Converge, but the Converge as a family or relationship or relational component of the Converge is still be very valuable among these all conversations of the regional leaders around the globe.
And relationships are central to life.
So what is most important for me, even within Next Move, is still be a relational component, still be very crucial. And it's not just one of the values. I would say it's a pivotal or crucial or basis, if you like. It works differently because it's cross-cultural. Sometimes it looks different when you have a conversation with Asian or Western or Latinos. It looks different, but still people like each other and have a deep conversation within it. Yeah. And I'm grateful that many people from Converse still be involved within the Next Move. And we will see what will happen in the future.
So working together is based on a strong relationship, which is a gift of God, and it's the nature of God is relational, the triune God. And we will come back to relationships and complexity of relationships and ongoing relationships in our conversation, I think. But it's great to see you again. So where are you from originally?
So I was born in the Soviet time in the place called Kyrgyz Republic now. It's one of the republics of the former Soviet Union. So I born there, yeah.
That's the official name of Kyrgyzstan, is it?
Kyrgyz Republic, exactly.
Republic.
Kyrgyzstan, it's well-known title of my country or name of my country. Yeah, I born there. Basically, when I was born, I was a part of the Soviet Union. That was a different country. Now we see a little bit different. So for those who are thinking about Kyrgyzstan and other republics as a part of Soviet Union, forget about that. It's a different country now. So there is a heritage and influence, legacy, but it's completely different. It's not the same as it was like in the 18th or 17th when I was born.
35 years since the Soviet Union.
Yeah, exactly.
So
There is a
whole
much
generation.
influence of different countries, and even within the country, there is a different movements raised during that time. I wouldn't say the national, but the very ethnic-centric movements it's not bad thing. It's just reality that people celebrate their identity. It's different than in the Soviet time.
It's a predominantly Muslim republic.
Officially, we're a secular country, but by population, more than 80% of population are Muslims in different levels or different expression of Muslim religion or Islam. But it's predominantly Muslim country. We have less than 10% Christian, but it's more ethnically every type of ethnic groups. But when we jump to the evangelicals, it's less than 1% of population are evangelical. So the evangelicals, they are really minor community.
Did you grow up in an evangelical home?
No, that's interesting because I was born in a typical Soviet family. Background was Soviet, totally. From my father's side, I'm supposed to be a Muslim. From my mother's side, I'm supposed to be an Orthodox Christian. In the Soviet time, there wasn't a big problem because we're just Soviet. But when Soviet Union collapsed, that was a question for me specifically and others to make a final decision with their own identity. And I struggled because I didn't want to be Muslim or Christian. So I decided to be atheist, and God found me in that time. Not through the formal identity, but through real life. I realized that God exists. There is a long story, but long story short, one of my friends became a Christian. It's foolish stuff, and people can change, and my friend can change. But he continued to grow as a Christian, to develop himself as a Christian. So I started to be very careful what's going on.
So
as a conflict. That's a long story.
You thought people cannot change. Is that what you're saying? Or
no, I think that it's not a very big issue to be a Christian or non-Christian or Muslim. So it will be depends of context. So my friend became a Christian is just because it's a new wave to be somebody. And I thought he will be
it's just his choice about his identity.
But he was so serious, and every aspect of his life was changed. And I was curious why it's so important to be a communist in that time. It's just to be a part of Communist Party. But here I saw the differences. There was dramatic change in my life because I lose my other friends because I was against any religious group, and people don't want to talk to me. Painful to be a teenager and to lose your friends. It's really painful. So there was a moment when I opened this kind of children Bible with the cartoons where the story of the first church. I opened it. The picture was picture of first disciples, apostles who were punished by the Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin, and they were quite happy to be punished by them. I was like, what's going on? Why those so
What's wrong with these people?
That's insane for me. And I started, that was a point of curiosity. I was starting to go further and found out the story about Saul, who was a persecutor of the first church. And I was like, it was so similar to me because I was against church and Christians. And then a few pages later, I found out the story of meeting Saul with Jesus in the way to Damascus. And there was a phrase, isn't it hard for you to go against me? And it was exactly a question to me because I was like, that's my problem because I'm not just against Christians. I'm actually against the Christ. So the story with Saul really struck me. It's about me. So I'm not against Christian, I'm against Christ who behind the Christian. So in my apartment, I down kneel and ask God, forgive me. I didn't want to make a problem with you. So sorry. So I came after that to my friend.
You just knelt down in your own apartment and said sorry to God.
I just didn't want to make a problem with God. He is huge. I didn't want to make a problem with him. And I felt in that time that I'm going against him. So I don't want to be an enemy. And because I was against my friend and his desire to follow Christ, I felt that I guilty and I need to ask forgiveness of him. So I came to my friend and asked his forgiveness, and he was like, no worries, Ruslan, I know that wasn't you, that was Satan behind you. And I prayed every morning about you, that God can reveal the reality. I was like, what's going on? So I understand that spiritual world is real. And from that time, I started to attend the local Baptist church, and that was happened more than 30 years ago. Now I'm continue to follow Christ.
And after that, you ended up going into youth work quite soon, or?
That's interesting, because in our congregation, there was in that time children work and youth work, and there was a gap between children and youth called teenagers, and they started to work teenagers.
Okay.
And I jumped in this ministry.
So
From that
youth
time
was young adults.
when we talk about youth, there was talking about young adults. Well, wasn't much done with the teenagers, and I started to be involved with teenagers. That's a reason why I was so interested. And I was always in between children and young adults, because I was involved with teenagers. Sometimes you're working with children, sometimes you're working with young adults. That's a reason why I was involved organizations like One Hope and then Converge and so on and so forth, because there was a relational component. There's so much in common when we talk about the next generation, particularly now when we talk about Generation Z. They are not teenagers anymore, but from that time we'll talk about the Gen Zs. That's exactly
So
who grew up.
so you've actually been involved with children, teenagers, young adults for decades now.
3 decades. Actually. So that's the reason why how we met with Converge, because there was a relationship with the regional organizations who work in Central Asia, and Converge one of the good places or platform to communicate with others who work in different places.
There's some really creative youth work happening across Central Asia, isn't there? In quite hard circumstances sometimes.
Exactly. You're right. So from 2008 and 2009, the Central Asian republics or countries received new laws which quite stricted to work with teenagers and children. And there is a lot of limitations. So when we talk about the work with children, it means that you are not allowed to work with children. You can work only with your own children or your child. People wanted that somebody will be involved with your children, and even those who are not attending the church would be very happy if you can communicate and connect it with their children. So we continue to work with those people, and
So
there
it
was a new
technically illegal.
if you have not official permission from the parents,
You need this permission.
from both sides,
Right.
actually, not just one. There was some stories when we had permission from one side and didn't have from another. It was a possibility to make a case for us, because in some level you cannot be a religious worker, but you continue to love these children who involve somehow new ministry. So we did camps, we did kind of social work with them, and from that there was a good conversations and good possibilities to share about Jesus and gospel and the spiritual reality around us, what we actually experiencing by ourselves. In other words, we're just witnessing what we're experiencing. When you say that was creative waves, yes. One of the problem when you go to internet, for example, to find some materials to work with teenagers, you find out that not only cultural limitations, because most of them coming from Western countries, primarily from United States and Canada, then you realize
And
that
those
it's
materials just aren't useful in this sense. So
you should be quite adaptive, not just to change the names, put Maria instead of Mary or Ivan instead of John. It's a much bigger job. You have to understand sometimes there is a different need than children and teenagers in West have. Like identity issue, it's quite different, or a little bit different than in Western country. And especially in the mixed marriages, children think about themselves differently. There is some similarities, of course, but we need to help them, because the old tendency in Central Asia that by definition, by your birth, you should be Christian or Muslim. But some people are not quite satisfied with that because they don't want to somebody make decision for them. So they're trying to find a way, how you can find a way, make a decision if you're not allowed to get the information about Jesus, about Buddha, whatever. You see what I mean? So that's a context we're working.
This episode is sponsored by CrossMap. If you're looking for a place that fills your soul and strengthens your faith, then visit crossmap.com, your trusted source for inspiration and life-changing stories from people of faith. Do you have your own story to tell? CrossMap Blogs is a welcoming place to launch your own blog, publish your testimony in Christ, and share stories that glorify God and edify His people. And while you're there, sign up for the CrossMap daily newsletter and get top Christian videos, inspiring devotionals, and stories from other content creators to strengthen your faith, delivered straight to your inbox. Be encouraged, be a part, be blessed. Visit crossmap.com.
But let me say this, the global youth culture is still be reality. We're talking about the cities, the children in London, in New York, in Almaty have a lot of similarity.
So Bishkek and Buenos Aires
Yeah, exactly.
would be
like in this year, 6, 7, everybody all around the world. No, I'm not sure that everybody who will listen us listen what I'm talking about.
I'm not sure that I understand what 6, 7 means, but if any listeners hear 6, 7, when you next hear it, go and ask a teenager what it means and to explain it to you. One of our grandsons tried to explain it to me recently.
6, 7, it's not a word, but it became
it's become a thing, hasn't it? Even if it's a meaningless thing. Yeah, and it's global.
It stays global, exactly.
Yeah. So one of the hats you wear now, Ruslan, is you have a responsibility within the Lausanne Movement. For your responsibility is for Eurasia, which you were telling me earlier. There's some confusion about what's Eurasia and what's former Soviet Union, and what does that mean to be responsible for Eurasia within the Lausanne?
Within the Lausanne, we identify 11 countries who have connections, a lot in commons. It's a former 11 countries or former 11 republics out of 15 republics. So when we talk about former Soviet, it not quite exactly, because former Soviet, the 15 countries, it's not Soviet Union anymore. Even the Russian language still be a common language for all area. It is sensitive now, and there is still be tendency in some countries to refuse the Russian language as the primary language or common language, whatever the reason. So that's sometimes why they call Russian speaking world, but it's so global, it's more political. So we don't use this term. It's more about this particular country which has some in commons and can use Russian language.
So those 11 countries would be all of the former Soviet Union countries, apart from the Baltics and Moldova?
No,
with those,
and Ukraine.
And Ukraine, okay.
Yeah, Moldova still be a part of this region.
Okay, so Ukraine is now included in Europe. In the Europe region.
Well, Ukraine definitely consider Eastern Europe now, but we continue have a conversation. So let me say this: Lausanne is not about borders; it's more about best way to connect people. So if we have a connection with people in Ukraine, no problem to have a connection with people in Ukraine. If we will have a connection with Europe, or in our case for Central Asia, we have a lot of connection with South Korea, for example.
Okay.
So we have collaborate to each other within Lausanne Movement, and it geographical identificator of primarily area. But it doesn't mean that people from Europe cannot work with, if it makes sense, or from Asia cannot work with Eurasia. But the term Eurasia became a problematic because it's overused in a political sense. When you just pronounce Eurasia, it could be in some places not welcomed. You say former Soviet Union, it's not exactly former Soviet Union. Territorially, yes, but
Christian Daily International covered the Lausanne Congress in Seoul in September 2024. So we covered that. We produced a lot of articles from there, but some people listening to this conversation may not know what is the Lausanne Movement. So they can check out on Christian Daily International all those articles from September 2024, but how would you, in a sentence, describe the Lausanne movement and its benefits?
Good. So I try to make it simple as possible. So the crucial word is movement. So it is a movement for global evangelism,
Okay.
which started from Switzerland, from the town or city called Lausanne from 1974. So that's two words. But for me personally, about other people, and we're again back to the conversation about relationship. Every movement starts from friendship. So Lausanne movement, it's more about to creating friendships and relationship with those who are interested to world evangelization. That's a main goal. So we're connecting people and we're connecting ideas around the global evangelism or evangelization. That's a simple, my simple definition. Let's make a friends toward the fulfillment of the Great Commission.
And you are doing that in those 11 countries, or
Exactly.
you because you already have lots of friends in those 11 countries. Although you're not living now in one of those countries, you're not living in Kyrgyzstan. Where are you living now?
I'm living in Germany, very welcome country, actually, to be honest with you. I'm so
They have
grateful.
welcomed you very warmly.
Yeah, very warmly, not only about the government, but also the local people and Christians here are so nice to us. And I wouldn't say that we feel like at home, because there is another question for us. Where is our home in reality? Can we identify in a particular place in the earth as our home in the full sense? Could be some different definitions of the home, like where is my family? That's my home. It doesn't work for everybody because there is so much separation in the families, so much replacement from the ancestor, or people forced to be in a different place that they used to live. And can we talk about the home? Can we create a home in the earth? What does it mean? So we're trying to create a home here in Germany, and people here are very crucial for us, and they're very kind and help us. Yeah, we're in Germany.
Yeah. And you moved here as a whole family, had a dreadful incident. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, there was a tragedy for our family. We've been here just 1 week, and our oldest sons, David and Roma, with their friends, were driving late night, and there was a rain, and there was accident. And after the car accident, Roma survived and others survived, except David. David, after 3 days, was died in the local hospital. We're now here, not far, living in an apartment not far from the graveyard or cemetery where he was buried, where his body was buried. Yeah, and we're experiencing kind of new chapter, even new book in our life. And all of this question about what does it mean to be a family, what does it mean to be what it means to have a home, and what is the church for us? Who is the church for us? What doesn't to be a Christian? What doesn't mean to be a believer? What means to be faithful to Christ? These all questions we thought that we already know the answer for last 3 decades. Now they became a kind of new questions for us. We started rethinking all of these questions. There's a big tragedy for us, but that allowed us to rethink very deeply these, I don't want to say religious questions, but let's say spiritual questions.
As you begin to do that, and we have talked about that a bit today, we've been to David's grave and prayed at David's grave. You talked about separation in families a moment ago. There's that sense of separation from David and yet not separation. Can you talk us through that a little bit more?
Yeah, in Russian we use this kind of statement, если все вместе, душа на месте, which literally means if everybody together, your soul in the place, your soul in the calm, in the peaceful, which means if somebody is missed, you have not peace, which is true for our situation. So There was question, it's still be a question, how we can develop as a family without David, because we used to grow up and to be a family with David. What kind of family now without David? Of course, there is a components of his physical presence, like how he was very helpful for our family, how he was treating to our youngest boys, his contribution to the family, that one portion. But there also emotional / spiritual portion of when we're sitting around the table, can we recognize not only God presence, but also David presence? Not physically, of course, but in our mentality, because in the memory, or maybe spiritually, he can be with us. So that opened up a lot of different spiritual questions. Like we start thinking about resurrection. Our youngest son asked a lot of questions about that, who is 7 now. I started to think about our prayer life. So if we can pray to each other as a family, how we can pray about David with each other and for each other. For example, if some of our sons have a problem in school and he was, I have a test tomorrow, for example, could you guys pray for me? That's okay. But could we pray for David? That was a question. It could sound like a silly question, but from the perspective that he still be a present in our family, we probably need to think about him. And we were like, for a few months, I thought, always remind myself about him, and I thought about him from the perspective of his loneliness. So only God and David, about their relationship, how God received him, where he is like a sleeping and just waiting for resurrection, or he is interacting somehow consciously with God, and so on and so forth. But recently, when I read about Moses, and God told him that you will see the land, but you will not allow to go the land. You will go to your fathers. That it's at least sound how it's written in Russian language. And I was like, so Moses came back to ancestors, to his fathers. He wasn't alone. What about David? So I started to think about it. Means that he's not physically with us now. Probably he's more close to our grandmother and a sister of my wife, who she was died because of the cancer. So these kind of questions arose just because of this situation. We start to rethink. Yeah. Separation is not only about physical separation, but to allow those who lost. It might be helpful for those who lose somebody, or maybe a close friend. Your beloved one is just disappeared. He continued to be in your mentality. He can continue to be alive in your memory, at least in that level. But if you believe in God, if you understand or receive that reality, you can recognize his presence and just allow it to be your family. Don't try just to erase him or her from your life.
So we talked earlier about the English word coping with grief. This is one of your coping mechanisms. Is that right?
Exactly. That sometimes the theological issues or questions could be like, you go to the graveyard, as you say, coping your strategy, take a time and take a space just to process it, to think and pray and read the passages from the Bible. And it's a huge opportunity for you to think about the question you never thought about. So that's a coping for me.
You read to me when we were at the graveside, you read to me Ecclesiastes 7 verse 2. It is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting. For death is the destiny of everyone. The living should take this to heart. So you read that verse to me at the graveside, and why has that verse become meaningful to you?
Do you remember we asked our youngest one, why it's more important to go to the house of the green rather than to the party. And the answer was very simple, because in the party you can make a scene. Let's unpack this answer. What kind of environment you have in a party? The party allowed you specific emotions and specific questions, which is not allowed you think about something that you can allow to yourself when you're in a graveyard. You see, there is a completely different environment.
You have the freedom in the graveyard.
Yeah, exactly. So in a party, you're allowed to do what you're allowed to do, being a part of the party. But in a graveyard, you're like before infinity. So you can ask whatever you want, because things like how you looks like, what kind of clothes you wear, what kind of car you use to come to the cemetery doesn't matter anymore, right? So from that perspective, the place of movement, particularly graveyard, is open up a freedom for you to think whatever you want. You are not Protestant anymore. You are not Christian. You're something bigger, if it makes sense. For us, it's an opportunity. It is hard because you are not prepared for such a questions. We just train from our childhood for simple answer for complicated questions, just to live normal life. Normally, if you will be asked such a big eternal questions, but let's make a kind of space in your life just to ask that questions and work on that. So yeah,
You began earlier to talk about what it means to be in Christ in this life and in the next.
yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
For us as a Protestant or evangelicals, we have a kind of, correct if I'm wrong, but we have a kind of taboo to talk about the life after death. So we should make a decision in our own life here, and then everything is decided. So you don't need to concern what's going on after, but that creates a separation from you and your relatives and everything in the spiritual life. So you are more concentrated in life here.
In the here and now, the
And
immediate.
here, immediate, exactly. Let's talk about the Christ as a faithful Lord, who is faithful not only in this life, but in eternity. Does it mean that his faithfulness and mercy is finishing by the death of a particular person? Does it mean that we don't need God's faithfulness for David after his death? I'm not sure. I'm unopposed. I'm sure that God's faithfulness and love and so on and so forth is continue after that. So God's continuation here and there, his faithfulness, his love, and so on and so forth is here and there. That makes a connection between me here in this earth and my son out of this earth. That's a reason why we have in our prayer life, we have a conversation with God about David. We pass greetings to David, whatever it means in that reality, because we have no idea.
That's Jesus.
Yeah, we just ask Jesus, could you send greetings to David? Just tell him that we continue to love him. We don't want to make him crying. We hope that he's in a better place. Why we cannot talk with Jesus about that? Because he loves. And do you remember that old stuff remind me the story with resurrection of Lazarus? Jesus wept before he is going to resurrect him. So there is a continuation between people suffering and the miracle is going to be performed. Jesus didn't change before and after the resurrection of Lazarus. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So
There are
God's faithfulness continues not only here in this earth, it continue after the death. That makes me more profound, because we are always thinking about God's faithfulness only here. God answered my prayer. He was faithful in here. It's a limited God, just for here and now.
So let's not limit God. He
No,
is for all time in all places. Yeah.
Exactly.
We're going to begin to wind down, Ruslan, but I do just want to spend a little bit more time discussing. You talked about ways of processing grief in different cultures and how it's actually in some ways probably been a little easier for you to process this awful grief in Germany than it would have been at home in Kyrgyzstan. Can you talk to us, just explain to us about cultural differences in handling death?
That's interesting for us because we grew up in a one culture and found out the situation in a different culture, and we can compare what's going on here and back in Kyrgyzstan. Yeah, that could be a difference in different places, but it's just an example. So everybody in my context back in Kyrgyzstan understand how to behave if somebody lost a relative. So people understand how
Death is accepted and part of
discuss.
life.
You have a 1 year for grieving. You have 40 days for the specific grieving. You have a week that people can concern about you, preparing the food, coming to you and spend time with you. You're actually not allowed to be alone during the first week after the death. So people always with you. And then it's step by step. So that's a kind of rules of game, and everybody understand in general how to behave. Here, people are just lost. He cannot understand how to behave. Disadvantage for you in a country where is freedom of individual is value of freedom of individual so high, so you should make your own decision how you want to proceed. That we don't have a much freedom there, but in the same time
You
people
have
don't know
freedom
how.
to process your grief in
Yeah,
your own way.
exactly. Yeah. Some people want to cry, some people want to be alone, some people want to go to the party, for example, just don't want to think about it. You will go, that's okay, but people don't know
How to handle death.
they just don't know. And yeah, that's advantage and disadvantage of different culture. There is no probably best decision or best way, but it's just reality. We see difference there and here. Yeah, there is a lot of freedom here. People are very polite, but in general they don't know what to do, how to help us. They're just trying to be with us or to be just represent themselves. In this situation, if people ask you how we can help you, okay, you have money for stuff, you will probably need some help in the first couple of weeks, and then you don't know. But in my context, people would be direct and they would say, you need this and those. So from one hand, it's an advantage that people can handle, but in another way, it's you just not allowed.
So that this and those might not be what you actually need. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. What do you actually need at this stage of your grief, do you think, you and Lena and the family?
I don't know, but honestly, I don't know. I do think that we need to continue to learn how to live. Simplicity became it's a very important thing for us. As think simple, it's more important in our life. Let's talk about breathing. Breathing. How often you think about your breathing?
Not very often.
But it's most important thing in your life, isn't it? So if you would have asthma, you would be answered differently. How often you think about your car? How often you think about your apartment? It's an important thing in our life, but less important actually.
Less important than breathing.
Than breathing, exactly. So when we talk about food, we can think about decoration, healthy, unhealthy food, unless you really struggle with hunger. That's related to the church, that related to the relationship. If we overwhelmed with performance in the church, we can be very criticized how too much music or less music and so on and so forth, unless you really need some spiritual help. And sometimes it's just some person who will sit next to you and just spend time to you and understand what they're talking about and just can say amen after your prayer. It's very important that you have a person. For us, very recently, we read about David in our family devotion, and the story with King David. And he was back after the Philistines war. He back and it was burned.
Yeah.
And people wanted to kill him because they lost a lot. And the only one priest who survived was always with me, David. And he was asked God, do I need to go further or not? For our devotion, there was a conclusion. It's so good in the time of turbulence to have at least one priest, one spiritual friend that could be able to pray for you or with you. So this simplicity, we learn that there are a lot of things that we already have, but we cannot join. We can fully enjoy what we have within the church. The old lady who is just entering the house of prayer or temple, whatever, could ask you, "How are you?" And I'm praying for you. That's much more important than the celebration and the prayer concert on the stage. So we're learning to value this simple thing. It's much more important for our spirituality. Friends, your visit, for example, it's a very important. It's just to be with us, it's just to stay and hear how we pray and a little bit cry. You see, there is a sign of that we are not alone. That's more important for us. We're learning in the learning process.
So the important things have become more important.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
Ruslan, it's a joy to see you. It's a joy to spend time with you. Tempted to ask a lot more questions about Central Asia, and I'm sure you'd want to encourage our listeners to pray for Central Asia and the former Soviet Union.
Yeah, I would be very grateful if you just can imagine a person, a girl, a boy in Central Asia. If you cannot make it, just go to internet and Google Kyrgyz boy, Kyrgyz girl, Kazakh boy, Kazakh girl, whatever. Just imagine this person. There is millions of them there who don't know about Christ, who don't know about that God is love. The only concern could be how to survive, and pray about them. That spiritual life, that reality of Christ and God can be revealed for them. Because there is a lot of limitations to share the gospel in Central Asia.
Pray for them that they might also know about the mercy and faithfulness of this extraordinarily loving God, despite all the open questions and unanswered questions. We know He is a merciful and faithful God for this life and the next.
And it's most important, He is still be alive. He is alive.
It's a great note to finish on, Ruslan. Thank you very much. Ruslan Zagidulin, my friend, thank you so much for being willing to talk to me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Faith Without Frontiers. I hope you've been refreshed, stimulated, encouraged, and inspired by the conversation, perhaps even challenged. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please subscribe so that you don't miss the next story of faith in the series. And do consider sharing the podcast with friends, colleagues, or members of your church community. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and strengthen you as you serve Him wherever He has placed you.